What is your biggest, most useful piece of advice for people going out on placement for the first time?
I would say just be flexible. There'll be a lot of last minute changes that can occur. Just kind of take a deep breath and go with the flow.
Love it. Very, very good advice. Ben?
Yeah, kind of say just kind of trust yourself. Just trust that even when you go in and you feel like you've forgotten everything you've learned over the year, you haven't. You just need to go in and kind of trust that you actually do have all that information in your head somewhere, and that when you're in the moment and you're kind of put under the right amount of pressure, all of that will just kind of instantly bubble to the surface, and you'll start coming out with interventions and goal plans and all these things that you didn't even know that you remembered.
Absolutely. Hilary?
I would just say take every opportunity that's there, or make an opportunity for yourself, because the first week I didn't realize that I could like shadow the physios and then like dietitians, speech language therapists, or like visit the community OT and everything, the dementia ward. And then my weeks flew by then because I was so busy and I was going to see other people, and it was just so much more enjoyable. So I'd just say take any opportunity that's going, because it makes it.
Definitely. And the Chords visit as well. Definitely make the most of your Chords visit. Sort of find something exciting that you're sort of generally interested in.
Don't panic. I was quite nervous for my first placement. It was starting within COVID times. We'd just gone into a new lockdown, and I just had no idea what to expect. And also I was a second year, but I'd never done a placement before because my previous one had been cancelled. So I was quite sort of, I just didn't know what to anticipate, and I was getting quite sort of nervous about what I'd be doing. And I had what some people would consider quite an intense first placement within mental health as well. So I got myself a little bit worked up about it, and I was lucky that I had a brilliant placement educator who just knew exactly what students go through because they've done it before, and sort of made me feel at ease. Everything that you need to know they have already, because they're used to having students, and so I sort of realized that there wasn't really any need for me to get stressed about it, even though my specific circumstances were quite unique. So yeah, just don't panic. It's even if you don't know what you're doing, the people around you do, and you're going to be supported in a really positive way.
Thanks, Hannah. Really good advice. Yeah, Georgie.
I definitely sort of had the same experience, in the sense that I was also quite nervous. It's sort of like the unknown, isn't it, going into it? And I definitely felt that the people around you just made such an effort to make you feel very comfortable, but also to reiterate what they expect from you as well. So that made me feel more comfortable, and just sort of made me aware of what they expect from me and what I expected as well. And sort of personally, I felt that preparing as much as I can for whether you're going to see a client and reading up their case notes, if there's anything that you read that you're not quite sure on, just to read up. I definitely feel like that helped me feel very much more prepared going in, and maybe slightly less nervous, because I feel like I've got the overall picture going into it. I feel like that's always good. You can always do a little bit behind the scenes as well if you're a bit nervous or unsure. I definitely feel like preparation really helped me personally.
Ditto. Yeah, completely. Amy.
Sorry, just to add to Georgina and Hannah's comments, I think another kind of really important factor is looking after yourself. So sleep, walk, have some mindfulness in the evenings if you need to, just look after yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, self-care is so important. Hey,
I would just say visit your practice, your place, your placement place beforehand if you can. It is a bit difficult at the minute because of COVID, but if you can, I would say definitely go visit, because on your first day, if you don't know where you're going, it's quite overwhelming in itself. I remember I couldn't visit my mental health placement beforehand, so I got lost on the way there. Not to the car park, but actually going from just the car park to the building, there were so many different buildings around, and it's really hard to get in without, if you don't have your fob and stuff like that. So it's really good to visit if you can.
That's really good advice. Thank you. Yeah.
My other bit of advice along those lines would be, do get to know your placement documents. So do what you can to support your placement educator. They're giving up a lot of time and energy to support you. I mean, mine was brilliant. I've 2 so far, both fantastic. But it's really helpful if you know what's going to be expected from the university and when, rather than just dumping that as a job on them, you know. So in your first thing, you're able to say, this is what I need. This is the things that I've got to get in. This is the bits that you need to look at. So be a bit self-reliant and self-organized. It really pays, and it really kicks off your relationship with your practice educator to a good start. I think it makes a big difference.
Thank you. And it's okay to ask, like, to be a bit demanding as well of your practice educator, because they're doing it voluntarily. You know, they wouldn't be practice educators if they didn't want to facilitate learning. So yeah, definitely, like Bruce said, just say what you need.
Do not be afraid. I think that's probably the one thing in every sense. Don't be afraid. Maybe be afraid of, you know, like your patient's unwell, but like don't be afraid of like your team. I was terrified texting other girls on the group. I was texting 2 days before, worrying like, oh my god, I can't sleep, I'm freaking out, oh my god, I'm terrified, what happens if they're really mean? I got in, and like half an hour into it, I was like, why the hell was I worrying? I was just, everybody's going to be nice. Nobody wants you to fail. Nobody's looking for you to be perfect and on it. Nobody's expecting you to know everything. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to get involved, and don't be afraid of the people around you, and don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Jenna?
I think for me, because I am quite an anxious person and I like everything being perfect, I think the best thing I ever did was to like schedule everything. So after I attended the first week, I didn't do any scheduling. I didn't do anything the first week. What I wanted to do was kind of like go and be there and not be worrying about other things. And then the weekend where I finished my first week, I kind of like sat down, and I'm very much of an electronic portfolio rather than a physical one. So what I did was I made like this whole system on my Google Drive for my placement, and now it's just so easy because I don't even need to think. I just like click a button and then I know what I have to do for the rest of the week. And I think that's something that's so important with placement. It's because you're so into it during the day, you kind of forget sometimes like the things your PE tells you to do. And so just have a planner, have like a schedule. I'm not going to say like you can function without these things, but it just makes it a lot easier if you're the type of person that's like constantly anxious about everything in your life. When you kind of have it visually in front of you and you realize, okay, it's a lot of work, or like, oh, it's not a lot of work, but I can do it, or like, oh, I can divide it across 3 days. I'll take a study day this week because I really need it. Like, it just helps you with like understanding how to go through placement without constantly worrying about that supervision that you're going to have in 2 days that you didn't do something for when you were like working with a stroke patient or you're working with your patient. And so I thought that was really helpful.
Thank you. Imogen?
Make sure you take time for yourself. I know it's so easy to get home, write your reflections, write your activity analysis. Take some time for yourself, watch TV, talk to your friends, talk to your family, put it out your mind, go do a workout, talk to your PE. They're there for you. They wouldn't do the practice educator training if they didn't want a student. That's what they're there for. They obviously want a student. Use supervision to talk about what's bothering you, what you want to work on. talk to other MDT members, talk to other therapists. If your practice educator is you're not really clicking, there's always lots of other people to talk to. Your link lecturer, they're there for you as well. If you're really anxious about something that you can't talk to your P about, talk to them. There's loads of people to talk to. I know us three are all in OUH, and they have an email for help me in placement. So there's lots of places to go to, but my top tip is definitely take time for yourself, reflect. In the first few weeks, I've kind of stopped doing it now. I've got a bit more settled in, but every day I'd write a diary of like how I felt that day. What have I achieved in that day? Even if it was, oh, I finally figured out how to use EPR or something like that. Just keep track of your goals. Like when you finish at your 6 weeks or however many weeks, you'll be like, oh my God, on my first day, I was impressed that I figured out how to use the printer. And now you're talking to patients and you're doing all of this. So every step is something to be cherished, and don't go hard on yourself because it is hard. And yeah,
I kind of already touched on it, but I'd say get to know everyone that you work with, and that's not just your practice educator, that's parents and family or whoever turns up with them to the appointment. It's carers of the people that you work with. It's like the admin staff. So Hannah and I worked on a farm as well. There was people all working all around the farm. I think there was so many different viewpoints. So there was other people on the staff who were OTs, or people that had trained at Brooks, people that knew the healthcare systems, a lot of people specifically around learning difficulties. And they gave me loads of really good sort of like ideas about what provision there is for adults with learning difficulty in Oxford. So we learned about places like Yellow Submarine, which is a cafe for people with learning difficulties, either to go but also to work there as well. There was things like nightclubs for people to practice socialization skills. There was My Life, My Choice.
Yeah.
Which I think was part of the nightclub thing as well, but they had sort of travel buddy schemes, just all this crazy, amazing stuff that was going on in Oxford, but I had no idea about because I'm not really, I haven't been put into that sphere before, but it was so nice to learn from all of these different types of people.
You're there to learn. It's not easy. I don't think many people find placement easy. And it's normal to be stressed. It's normal to make mistakes. And yeah, don't be hard on yourself. And yeah.
Have fun as well. Like you're allowed to have fun, even when.
Enjoy yourself.
Yeah, it just whatever you're doing, like try and enjoy it. Make the most of the experience. Yeah, definitely have fun. Okay. What was the scariest part of placement and how did you overcome it? Ben?
I wouldn't really describe this experience as scary, just incredibly unexpected and just kind of like, it was just the last thing you would have wanted to happen at the time it happened during the placement. I think it was my second week, midweek, and I was basically driving back home from somewhere in the Cotswolds to Oxford, and I got into the city centre of Oxford, and my car literally just broke down, and steam was like pouring out the bonnet, and like it literally stopped working, stopped moving. I was like, right, I have never had to fix a car by the side of the road before, and my entire placement literally depends on me having this thing.
Yeah, so prepared to be, what is it? Surprised. I don't know what the phrase is. That will do.
It's kind of as well, it was the surprise that caught me off guard. I had one patient, and it was like early on in my placement, maybe even my first week, and he was such a sweet, lovely man who had had a stroke, and my PE told me to ring the next of kin, which just so happened to be his daughter. So because this man was so lovely and he was so grateful and thankful. I just presumed that the family member would be a nice person, like not a nice person, but like, you know, the kind of the same. And I rang her, and she was just so frustrated, and she was so, not even angry, but like agitated and just so upset over the whole situation. Because as well with COVID as well, obviously you can't have any visitors in, so she couldn't visit her dad, and it was just lack of communication that really upset her. But it wasn't even from the OT department, it was the medical side of things. So the doctors hadn't provided her with enough information on what was going on with her dad. But I just so happened to be the one person to ring her. So I got all of everything on the phone. It was shouting, and it was just I felt so sorry for her. She's just so upset, you know, the unknown, you don't know anything, she just wanted clarification. So in the end I just had to tell her, I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I was like, I'm a student, I'll get my PE to ring you back and I'll talk to the medical team. So I had to go back and find the doctors and go back through the whole MDT and try and find someone. Eventually the doctors rang her again and explained everything to her, and then I was talking to her on the phone a week later. She was so grateful, like she thanked me so much, and she's a completely different person on the phone. But I think I just didn't expect the and you kind of have to stay so professional as well, and like you deep down kind of just want to pretend that the connection's gone and hang up and be like, oh, someone else ring here, but you just have to go. And you just have to go through and you just listen. I just taken notes on everything she said to make sure that I could give it to the doctors, because like I was only an OT, like it was my first week, I was a student in a new ward, I was a very small fish in a big pond, so I had to go up to the big scary doctors and be like, hello, you need to ring this woman very quickly, please.
Yeah,
that was the scariest thing for me because I just didn't expect it.
And that takes practice. That
yeah,
it definitely, you've got to be quite brave to sort of put down the phone and go up to the medical, like go up to the consultants and say, you really need to do this, because you can sort of feel like they're going to look down on you, but actually once you've done it a few times and then you sort of use your clinical reasoning skills to say exactly why you need this done like yesterday, then you do sort of build that confidence and it becomes easier. But that was also, you know, yeah, going up to the team during ward round or whatever, that was very scary for me, or presenting in ward round.
Yeah, because they're all just staring at you and they're like, who are you? I'm like, I'm an occupational therapy student, who are you?
But you get that, don't you overcome it.
It happens. And then the next time then I had like kind of an upset next of kin later on in placement. It wasn't half as scary as that because I kind of knew what to do, and kind of like I talked to my supervisor as well and be like, oh, what do I even say? And yeah, that was my scariest part anyway.
I didn't really fall into scary category, but it is something that's really hard to handle, is when you have someone that's been put on a palliative pathway or is very close to the end of life. The conversations that you not only have with that patient, but the conversations you have with their family are really tough. I remember one day, like I was talking to this wife and I was trying so hard to not cry in front of her because I was just I was inspired by her strength. And I think it's one of those things that you never really expected because you just hope that's not going to happen. But it's really tough, and it's something that like it's good to reflect on after the fact and talk with your PEs about, and try and gain as much insight from them that you can on how you can better handle it going forward. But yeah, I think it's just something good to be aware of before you step out into the world of placements.
Absolutely, thank you. And there are some good books out there about sort of managing that pathway, not necessarily OT books, but really just, you know, self-help almost books of how to reflect on that as well, and how to communicate with family members and friends.
So I was on a psychiatric intensive care unit. So we have a lot of patients who are brought in by police and can generally be quite violent or aggressive, lots of shouting, that kind of thing. So that was quite a sort of learning curve for me, because people with those sorts of conditions, so things like schizophrenia bipolar disorder, that's not something I had much sort of experience in regular life. So you don't interact with people who are really struggling with those kind of conditions very often in general life. So that was quite a new experience for me. And so things like people like service users telling you they're going to kill you and things like that, it was quite a shock for me to experience. But that was where my placement was quite unique, in that I was never on my own. I had an alarm like attached to my belt at all times. And so the team generally make you feel very safe in that sense. There's a lot of staff to patient ratio. So there's loads of people around. You're never going to be like on your own where no one can see you. And so that was really reassuring for me.
Thanks, Hannah. And I was going to ask as well, just off the back of that, did you, if something happened and you wanted to request extra supervision, or you wanted to speak to one of our lecturers, did you feel like you could?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. I had a really supportive PE. Vicky and Gail are amazing, and I know that I could drop them an email with sort of anything. And we also had, I was within Oxford Health, so we had like Oxford Health sort of group Teams meetings every week with a lady called Ruth. And so then we could catch up and say how our week had been, and if we were struggling with anything, and we could talk to her in private if we needed to. So that was another sort of support network that you had as well, which was really good.
For me, my scariest part was like the first few days. I remember I'm not an anxious person, but I remember being quite anxious. Like actually, I'd say even like before I even started, like, what am I gonna do? Like, I felt like I didn't know, like, what's occupation? I don't think I could define occupational therapy very well. It was really tricky. I read up on it, but I feel like I didn't really have a good grasp on it. But after those first few days, you'll get comfortable quickly, I find, and that's what I've heard from other people. And you're more capable than you think. Yeah. That's what I think.
Advice. Yeah, believing in yourself is so important. Going out on placement it is really scary. I don't know if either of you suffer with imposter syndrome, but I never think that I'm going to be good enough for the job, or I think that something terrible is going to happen, but actually it is the scariest part for me as well, was the first week, like Friday 5 o'clock, I was like, oh my gosh, I survived. Jeff, what about you? What was the scariest part?
Yeah, I'm not too sure. I guess not particularly scared of anything, but it's just worrisome that you might have to like try to pick up certain skills like fairly quickly. Like for me, I was like very garbage at like writing notes, so that was like a constant thing. People was like, "Yo, I have to fix up all your notes," or they'd always have to like review my notes with me because my notes were just garbage, or not up to the standard. Or I don't even know if like I thought they were like okay, they were decent by the end, okay, but it's like certain things, I don't know. Yeah, I just worried I was just like taking up too much of my PE's time for them, like just trying to help me out, correct mistakes and stuff.
I think the thing is as well is that I think it's very normal to be scared throughout at various times throughout placement, and definitely sort of pre-placement in that first week. It's like first week of school or something, but we wouldn't be sent out on placements if our lecturers, who are very experienced at doing this, didn't think that we were capable, and also if we had failed our exams as well. There's a reason we have to learn what we have to learn before first placement, and I think if you just wing it or you cheat in your exams, it will catch up with you definitely. on placement. I can imagine that would be quite scary if you have cheated your way through your anatomy and physiology exams and then get a placement in neuro or something.
Yeah. Well, I think one other thing was you learn all these things and you realize like a lot of it is like not even used like in the first week of your placement. You're just like, is my knowledge like really useful? All this learning, these models, and then my peers are
A lot
like,
of it is just late.
can you tell me
Oh,
what
sorry, I didn't mean
models you're using? I'm like, I've never seen these before. I'm like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, you depending on what you're like, where you're based. Like my first placement, I was in complex medicine, and I mentioned Moho, and they were like, "We don't use that here. Like, we're CMOP. That's it, really." I was like, "Oh no." Okay. Well, sorry, Seamus, I cut you off, I think.
Yeah, I think it's easy to say, like, I think a lot of what you learn just like feels latent. Like it just like feels like it's just built into like your background knowledge at some point, if you know what I mean. Like it feels like, oh, like I didn't really use like what I learned in class, but I feel like you use it without really knowing you use it. Like you use like CMOP without even realizing you're using the model, because you're like looking at a person holistically. You almost have to use a model like that, like you have person, occupation, environmental factors.
I think everyone's probably expecting me, everyone probably, to be like, oh, and say I was worried about working in a hospital in COVID, but I was actually pretty okay with that. I knew that was what it was going to be like. It's nothing like what you see on TV, everyone on oxygen and things. So please don't be put off by what you see on the news. You don't see people laughing. You don't see people speaking on the phone with their families and things like this. But my scariest thing was probably my first phone call to a family member. I wasn't expecting for me to like, that would be something I would be doing in like my 3rd or 4th week. My practice educator said it and I was like, and the first family member I called was crying on the phone, and as soon as you get into your OT role, you can just deal with it fine, and you don't realize until you put that phone down that you've done your first phone call, and then once you've done one, you can kind of do them all. So that was my scariest thing, talking to my first family member, because it's really hard for them that they can't see they can't see the patient. They're having to take your word for it as an outsider. So yeah, that was my most daunting thing. But I think once you do it once, you can kind of do it again.
Well done. That's not going on platinum, but that is really daunting. It was also one of my most terrifying moments. So totally relate there. Bryony.
This is gonna be a little bit weird, but well, not really weird, but because I'm on a neuroscience unit, you see a lot of people that have had a lot of changes behaviorally, cognitively, and physically. And I think probably the hardest thing was getting used to cognitive changes, because it is a really daunting thing, especially changes to speech. When a patient is nonverbal and does not feed back to you actively, it is probably one of the hardest things ever, because you ask them questions and they just stare at you like, what do you do? Or I was seeing a patient that had the most aggressive brain tumor removed, and my first thought was already, oh my lord, this woman is unwell. My second thing was, I'd read through the notes, I was feeling quite confident leading the session. I went in and suddenly she wasn't speaking to me. When all through her notes she was verbally communicating, and suddenly she wasn't speaking a damn word to me. So my entire plan for this patient had gone completely out of the window, and you just freeze and you can't help it. It's like oh, my plan's not worked, nothing's exactly how I'm planning it, I don't know what to do now. And I think that's probably the scariest thing that's happened to me, but you have to roll with the punches. And I think that's one thing that placement will teach you, is that not everything's going to go to plan always. That's okay. Even band 7s, band 8s, doctors, their plans don't go the way they envisaged it. It's okay. It's okay to turn to the person you're working with and going, what do I do now? I don't know. You're not expected to know what to do. And I think that was probably the scariest thing for me, was completely going blank in front of a patient who stared blankly at me.
That I haven't experienced that, but it does sound really scary actually, and it sounds like you worked around it so well. And I love what you said about rolling with the punches. That's so true. Nothing goes, I mean, some things go according to plan, but actually in my experience more doesn't than does. But occupational therapy is creative, isn't it? So it's up with, you know, what do you do? What's your backup plan? Thank you again, Bryony. Jana.
So because I've only been doing my placement for 2 weeks, I haven't really experienced a lot, but I will say one day my PE couldn't come in, and being like freshly into placement, it's like you kind of look like a little like puppy following your PE, being like, I don't know what to do, so I'm just gonna follow you around. And so my PE couldn't come in, and the band 7 just looked at me and she's like, oh, so what are you gonna do today? What's your plan for the patients? And I was like, excuse me, what do you mean? She was like, they're not my patients. I don't know them. Do you want to talk to me about them? And I was like, yeah. And then I explained a couple of things, and then the band 7 was like, okay, I want you to create like a whole intervention plan for today for this one patient. And the issue with this one patient is the doctors, the OTs, the physiotherapists kind of struggle. It's fine. We kind of struggle with this patient, because what happened was they went into hospital for a completely different reason. It wasn't for stroke, and then it was something to do with the heart. And then when they did it, it like created a bunch of strokes in their head. And so what happened was, I'm dealing with a really complex person who, thankfully, it was mostly cognitive. There wasn't a lot of physical, but with cognitive, it's like I don't know what to do, because they get distracted easily. They don't want to talk to you. They'll start swearing out of nowhere without knowing that they're swearing. They won't remember you, even though you were with them like 2 minutes before sometimes. And sometimes they'll be like, oh my God, how are you? And you're like, oh my God, what? You remember me? And so it depends on the person, really. And then they put me with this really, I love this patient. They're such an amazing patient, but they're really hard to deal with when my PE isn't with me. And she was like, yeah, I want you to create an intervention plan. And I sat with one of the TAs, and we thought of a bunch of things we can do that day, just so we can like give this patient an OT session without my PE being there. And I went back to the band 7 and I was like, can I do this? And she was like, yes. And so I went to the patient with the TA, and we did it together. And that was really scary in the beginning, because I was like, I have been doing this for a week and 2 days. Why am I being forced into this situation? This is not nice. But my PE couldn't be at work that day, and her patients needed someone to do an OT session with them. And so you are going to be put in situations that you're not going to think that you're going to be in ever. But you will be okay, because there are so many people who can help. It's not just OTs. That's the thing with like wards. It's not just OTs. It's speech and language therapists, it's physiotherapists, it's nurses, it's pharmacists, it's doctors. It's literally everyone that could ever work in a hospital in one place. And so you can talk to any of them and be like, I don't know what to do, I need help. And they will help. They are such nice people. Like, they are so excited to have like a student ask them questions, because they want to tell you things. And so I think that was a hard and scary thing to do. But at the end of the day, I went back home and I was like, oh my God, I just did that after only 1 week of placement.
Yeah.
I am the smartest woman alive.
How awesome am I? Oh, thanks. Thank you so much. So that's the end of the questions. I'm aware that I've taken longer of your time than I thought I would. So thank you so much for your patience. Is there anything else that you would like to say or share for the last couple of minutes?
I'll just chuck something in there.
Yeah, go.
Don't expect yourself to remember all of your anatomy and physiology. Even your band 7s are going to Google things, Google medications, Google conditions. If you have access to a computer and you don't know something, Google it, because that is okay. The doctors are probably doing it as well.
Yes.
Everyone's doing it. Don't expect, because in the time in anatomy and physiology, you're like, oh my God, how am I ever going to remember all this? But just Google it. No one cares. No one minds. Everyone's doing it. It's the one thing I was like, on the first thing I saw, and I was like, I don't know what that is. I was like, I feel really bad about Googling it because I feel like I'm expected to know this. And then I was sat with my president's educator and she went, I don't know what that is. The same thing as me. And she just sat there and Googled it. I was like, it's fine. So yeah, don't be afraid to Google anything that you don't know. It is okay.
Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you. I'm not sure who had the hand up first. So I'm going to go Janet and then finish on Bryony.
I think for me the biggest tip is when you first get a handover or like a paper, so it depends on how your ward does it, and this also depends on every unit and every ward. My ward uses a lot of abbreviations. Everything is in an abbreviation. Sitting on the side of a bed is an abbreviation, and it's like SOEB, and I was like, what is this? Why is it so long? And so if you work in a place where there are abbreviations, kind of like collect them. Like I made this whole document of these, like it's over 50 like abbreviations. Literally, I didn't even think there was that much, but collect them and then like go ask a TA or go ask anyone who's free and be like, what does this mean? And like for us, it's because like right side weakness, left side weakness, upper, left, upper, and it's like, it's so many things and everything is abbreviated. And at one point you're like, people are gonna talk and you're like, this is not English. This is not a language. I don't know what they're saying. But honestly, all it's gonna be is like, just open like EPR or your handover or whatever is you're reading, whatever you're reading. And like, literally, as Imogen said, just Google it. It will appear on Google. It literally will. Just write medical after it and it's gonna be there. And just have like a list. And like, I think for my first week that was really helpful because they're like, I'd be reading the EPR because my PE would be like, oh, go read it now. We're gonna go see the patient in 15 minutes. I'll be like, okay, sure. And I'd read it and I'm like, these are letters. This is not English. And then I'd like search up the letters and do everything. And that helps a lot. But also if your ward does not use abbreviations, don't use them because they're gonna be bothered. So it just depends on what's the norm in your ward. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. And a couple of other groups have also brought it up. And I think what we're going to do additionally to this is create a document. And we all, it sounds like everybody created their own document and we've probably doubled up on most things, but hopefully it would help somebody if they just, you know, read it or just had it folded up in their pocket all day long, which I did. Okay, Bryony.
Main thing I'd say is you're going to have bad days. You're never always going to be perfect. And this is the thing I've had to drill into my brain, is that a bad day is not a bad placement. And not doing something perfectly does not mean you're doing something badly. It means you're learning. And the fact you can identify that it wasn't perfect is good. And the fact that you can take the things that didn't go the way you wanted and you can say, oh, I don't like how that worked. That's good, because that means you can take it forward and you know what to work on for next time. I think that's probably been the hardest thing for me, because I do have this process in my mind where it's just like, oh, I haven't done something perfectly, and then somehow I'm going to get kicked out of university in the same sort of spiral of negative thought. I don't know why. I'm sure a lot of people have it as well.
Imposter syndrome.
Yes, absolutely. You've just got to, if your practice educator, is pushing you and is saying, I want you to do more, you can do more. It's because they believe in you. It's not because you're doing badly. It's because they want you to excel. They don't want to fail anybody. They want you to do the best you can do. And, just because you're not getting overwhelmingly positive all the time feedback and you're getting some constructive criticism doesn't mean you're doing badly. And the one thing I also remembered that my band 7 physio said, that maybe I shouldn't be saying because this is going to the university, but they're not looking for people to get full marks on everything. They're not looking for people to be obsessed with marks and grades and getting firsts and everything. They want people that want to learn. They want people that want to engage with what they do, and they want people to be excited, and they want people that can talk to patients. They want people that can do these things, and focusing on grades is great, but only to an extent, and it's only going to get you so far. Getting first and everything's amazing, but if you then can't talk to a patient, you've got to weigh it up.
What's been your most enjoyable experience during placement?
I can go first. Multiple things. I think my most enjoyable experience was going into a section that I didn't think I would enjoy. So I was working with the older population, and the gratification that I got at the end of every day by talking to them, helping them, and them thanking me, even though I didn't do much except maybe help them get dressed for the day or wash for the day, was very satisfying. And it was a field that I didn't think, or like a specific field that I didn't think I could go into or would enjoy. And I did. And then despite, whether they had certain kind of illnesses or diagnosis, it was so rewarding, even if they were mad that day or upset. Just being able to help in any way was very rewarding. And I was very fortunate to have a very nice, caring PE that was always checking in on me and making sure that, whatever happened that day I was okay at the end of the day before I went home, and very attentive. If something was off, she knew and was like, hey, do you need 5 minutes? And then, so I got to say overall, like, the placement was a lot more enjoyable. I went in a nervous wreck, and then by the end of it, I was confident and happy with what happened.
Oh, giving me goosebumps. Hannah?
I think just going off the back of that as well, it can be a really affirming experience. And I think I was very much the same as Bianca. I was absolutely terrified of going on my first placement because it had been moved back by COVID and things. So we'd had kind of a little bit longer to wait before we actually went on our first placement. And it was so nice to just, even like within the first couple of weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and at the end feel like, oh, what I've learned, I actually do know, and I actually can apply this to situations, and I am capable, and I am studying the right course, and I am going to be able to qualify and do this as a job for the rest of my life, kind of thing. Because I think there's a lot of pressure, particularly before your first placement, that it's going to be a bit make or break, and you worry about, oh, is it right for me? And sometimes your first placement will be harder than the rest of your placements as well, so should acknowledge that as well.
Does anyone else have a favorite? Yeah, Naomi.
I think just kind of echoing both of what they said, like kind of by the end of your placement, you're just like, oh, wow, I know what I'm doing. Like my most enjoyable experience was when probably like my practice educator, after we would go see a patient, she would say, okay, so what's the plan? What are we going to do? And then I was just like, oh, yeah, this, and this. And she's like, yeah. So you're just like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm talking about. So it's just kind of satisfying to have that, oh man, I actually do know what's going on. But to also realize that I think the first placement is really difficult, just trying to get into the mindset of placement. I remember I would come home totally just exhausted, and I would go to bed like so early. By 8 p.m. I was in bed. And so it's just kind of, getting your mindset used to the placement area, and then knowing that you're just going to be drained for probably the first week or two.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I would just finish off by saying, I mean, I'm very biased. I've worked in the NHS for a long time, and
anyone who gets an NHS placement, you are incredibly fortunate, because it is an amazing organisation and you meet people from all walks of life, and you are kind of, you can be in their life for the briefest of moments, but you could possibly have changed it. So yeah, just really kind of feel grateful for that, and honour that. It's almost sacred, really, that relationship that you have. But yeah, just enjoy it.
That is very profound, and it made me think actually
Sorry, that's probably too much for a Friday afternoon.
No, it was great.
Moment, they also can and will shape who you become. They will change your life too.
Well, I'm happy to say, as well as the virtual placement with adult social care, I also had a sort of, I guess, a kind of role emerging placement for my second one, which was a research project. And that was really interesting for me. You know, I like that area. It was something different. It was something that perhaps I might not have typically got outside of COVID times. But it was an interesting opportunity to explore sort of what goes on behind the scenes. So as practitioners, we all read research and we're all going to use it for CPD, but to actually see that process and be involved in it and think about what happens behind the scenes, that was really good. And I think that was something that I'll take away with me and use in practice.
Thanks, Linda. Amy, you're next.
So I really enjoyed the training that we've received on placement. We've had a few different lectures, and one of the training that I received was called Intensive Interaction, which is it's a kind of, it's for individuals who are non-verbal. So it allowed you to kind of communicate with individuals at the early stages of development with communication. Which I then transferred my knowledge into an interaction with the service user who was non-verbal, and it was brilliant. And that was my favourite part of placement so far.
I have to say, we've only been here for 5 weeks. I feel like I've been here not that long, but then I also feel like I've been there forever. I feel so valued in what I do, in everything I do. I feel trusted, which is absolutely amazing considering it's only really our first placement. Just getting stuck in, I think our whole cohort probably was so desperate to get out after missing our first placement last year. I have to say, just the most enjoyable thing is just being there and being able to turn up every day and just doing what our degree has been for the last year and a half, and finally being able to put that theory into practice and seeing how occupational therapists actually work in real life. I have to say, my favorite thing is just getting stuck in every day, even in these hard times. Yeah, I mean, and it's not a particular one event, but yeah, my favorite thing is just turning up and getting involved.
Thank you. You sort of motivate me when I listen to you. It's very passionate. I think Jana had her hand up next, so I'm going to go to Jana and then I'll come to you, Bryony.
I've actually had 2 things that I've loved so much. Like, it made me so happy, and like I texted Imogen about it, but one of the things was I was reading some of the soap notes from a patient that came from another hospital. And you know, at the end of the notes, it says who wrote it, and it said Imogen Jeffries, OT student. Oh! And I was like, there's no way. And that same day, we were referring a patient to a different place to continue rehab. And then Miriam, one of my cohort, also works there, and she was like, Jenna, one of your patients came to our place. And it's just so nice seeing how like people's placements connect. And like, we're not in the same hospital, but you know, I get to see like all these people working and seeing everything in placement add up together. It was so nice. And I think like the second thing that's more like less placement and more like actual work environment, I just really love how some patients like look at you and are like, thank you. And I'm like, I've been here for 2 weeks, I have done nothing. But I think they feel less, it's like some patients do feel less intimidated by students, and so they feel like they can open up more. And so I've had patients talk to me about things that have nothing to do with their stroke, but it does affect them. And I always bring it up to my PE, and then she's like, yeah, we can do like an emotional screen and see what's going on. And it's just really nice seeing these patients like talking to you in a way where it's like, I trust you. It's just such a nice feeling.
Yeah, I completely agree. Thank you. Bryony.
I was gonna lead on from Imogen's point. It's just, I feel like so much of my passion for what I do has been brought back over this placement. I feel like COVID, my placement, I can't speak for everybody, but my placement got cancelled 2 days before it was meant to start in March last year, and I was absolutely heartbroken. I cried. I was angry at the entire universe, like, why has this happened to me? I was so excited. And then we had so much time off. We came back in September, but it was online, and I know that everyone's doing the best they can, but it's just, you know, like, not seeing people in person was really difficult. And you know, it's just different, and it just wasn't exactly the same. But now, actually physically being on placement, I feel so connected with the degree I'm doing. I feel so connected with things we've learned. I've been like, oh, okay, well, this is why we've gone over this, and this is why we've learned this theory, and this is why we look to research more things and do evidence-based practice, and this is why we're encouraged to think outside of the box and work, you know, with the environment and the patient together, you know. I just think physically doing it, although the theory is one thing, it just brought back all this love for what I do that I lost. I didn't lose the love for the degree, but you become disjointed, I think, especially when everything's through a screen. You're not connected in the same way as you are when you're physically in an anatomy lesson, you know, like physically holding the models, or, you know, when we're doing OSCE practice like we were last year when we were doing the one-handed dressing in groups. It's, you know, doing case studies and PowerPoint presentations are the best we could do last term, but I think actually the placement itself has brought me so much joy because it reminded me how much I love what I do, and it reaffirmed how happy I am with the choice of my profession.
That's really beautifully put. Thank you, Bryony. I was also crying 2 days before my placement was meant to start. I think partly because my placement was cancelled, and another part was that I had been visiting my mum for the weekend, well, my parents, and I ended up being stuck there for 3 months. So I was really upset. I love them to pieces, but
yeah, it's tricky to pick one because there's so many good parts. Just as a general overall point, we were so we're on at Farmability on this farm. It was late summer. We'd turn up every day in our shorts and t-shirt, have a session in the morning, have a session in the afternoon, and it was things like herding sheep, putting up fences, loads of physical outdoor work with loads of really passionate people. So just overall, it was amazing. I think if I had to nail it down to one specific event, maybe, is I worked one-to-one with a co-farmer who I saw improve sort of no end from when I was first working with him. It was a tiny thing, actually. It had this lunchbox that he'd bring every day, and it had like 2 clips on the side, and he would struggle with it week after week after week. And it was slowly just trying to give him some platform to start opening things for himself, which by the end he did, and was really cool. Yeah. I still see him now, and it was things like having the wherewithal to go and get in the car when you're going out to go for a walk. He'd sometimes just kind of stand there absentmindedly expecting someone to do it for him. but he now gets in the car, gets in, buckles himself in. So I think seeing those types of improvements were amazing.
I'm smiling so much because like I remember watching your work with him and watching him grow so much in just that short space of time. And I know, you know, you're still working with him, but wow, yeah, that was, I have to say that was one of my most favorite moments. And when there was just this outburst of his laughter, which we'd never heard before.
Well, that's the thing as well. It was so funny because he was just completely laughing his head off when he finally got this lunchbox back on. It's like such a small thing. It makes such a massive difference. Yeah, it was so sweet.
Thank you. Is there anything else that you'd like to say before I start recording?
Where else have I got? I think I've covered all of the points I was going to cover. I think one thing that I might not have stressed enough is it is only 8 weeks. So first off, make the most of it. And second off, even if it's the worst thing in the world, even if you completely hate it, it is only 8 weeks long. I'm pretty sure, you know, like any of us can grind that out. I think learning, if it's something that you don't like, is going to be really useful for when you become an OT. So I think that the 8 weeks, the small amount of time is a really good thing. Because if you love it, I think there's plenty more opportunity to get involved. Like we said earlier, I'm still working with one of the co-farmers at Farmability. But again, if it's something that you're really not enjoying, it will end.
What would you tell yourself now if you could go back to before you started placement?
I would just tell myself that it's going to be grand. Like, I don't know why I was worrying so much about it. It was so fine. I was like, they were all students before. They understand that we're students now. The whole point of placement is to go out and learn, to get experience. It's fine. It's like, it's nothing to be afraid of. It's what you actually want to do. And then you get to go do it. It's actually kind of cool. So
love that. Thank you.
I wouldn't be scared.
Ben.
Yeah, the thing, I kind of second that as well. It was like I built up so much to what I thought was going to be expected of me, and in the end there wasn't actually, in terms of the actual content of what I was doing, there was nothing to actually really worry about at all. And I think the thing that I really did worry about the most had nothing to do with OT or the placement at all. It was because I was doing a community placement. I was really worried about driving to all the different places and getting lost or not getting there on time. And no, it turns out it's actually completely fine. Driving even in the country roads of Oxford is nowhere near as hard as you think it's going to be.
Yeah, I remember having that conversation with you, Ben, when you were talking about cornering your car really fast.
Yeah.
Abby.
I think, like, similar to what both they said, you know, things will click into place, and you know, it's why you're here and you'll enjoy it. It might just take a few days to relax yourself into the role, but also that, I mean, your team's there to support you and to kind of guide you through decision making. And if you don't understand something, don't be afraid to ask. They're there to help you, and that's why they've signed up for this role. If they didn't want to do it, then they wouldn't have signed up for it. So yeah, so just take it day by day and have fun.
Thank you. Okay. Oh, Nafisa.
Yeah, I'll just say, back up everybody, like when they say the team's supportive, it's quite true. Like your PEs are there for that reason. The thing that I felt personally was I wasn't prepared, was because it was a mental health placement and like I was just told last minute. So trying to like read up on everything as fast as I could was kind of really hard for me, especially not knowing the criminal justice system here. So it was just that was the only thing for me. But you know, I picked it up as I went, like the first week or two.
So preparation is important.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks guys. Question number 2. What's been your most enjoyable experience during placement so far? Ben?
Yeah, I think the most enjoyable part for me was actually when I was probably actually the first or second client we saw on the very first day. where I think like we just put in like she had some kind of, I think she had fibromyalgia, and we just went there to insert a bed rail. And as soon as the bed rail was installed, her entire mood and perspective and just the entire kind of vibration of her energy just kind of changed, and she just she went from incredibly low mood to just incredibly grateful in seconds. In such a small thing. I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. I can see myself doing this.
Abby.
I think I really just like building that therapeutic relationship and like rapport with the patients. I always found that really enjoyable. But one of my favorite parts is when we would do discharge visits, because it made everything very, I kind of give you the big picture, and seeing somebody in their home environment is a totally different experience than in the hospital. And most people we're working with are so thrilled to get home from the hospital that just seeing their change in demeanor and how much more confident they feel when they're back home. I really liked that side of it.
My favorite part was probably on my second placement, herding sheep through a barn. So I was at Farm Ability, so on a farm, herding sheep through a barn with a lovely guy who had cerebral palsy. And I was so worried, so worried that he'd fall over, but he was wonderful with the correct support. He was great, and it was just the most fabulous experience, and to see his face like light up and how much he enjoyed that and how much he thought that he would never be able to do something like that. It was just really wonderful. Is there anything you wish you'd known before starting placement?
I don't know if it's something I wish I would have known, but I think it's something I wish I would have accepted a little bit earlier on, is it's okay to be overwhelmed. It's okay to ask for help or say, oh my goodness, this is a bit more than I thought it was going to be, because you are kind of being thrown into the deep end. Even as an observer, you're learning so much. Day one, I walked in and we were talking about clients and using acronyms and descriptors that I had a piece of paper that I just started writing things down on because I could not remember what I didn't know, kind of thing. So being able to chat with my PE and say, I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed, I think on that first week would have really helped me a bit more. So that would be my one thing, is it's okay to ask for help. The PE is there to assist you in any way they can.
Thank you, Ellie. Sound advice.
I was just going to add to Ellie's really. Do carry a pen and a bit of paper, and do ask questions, and specifically do ask about acronyms, because wherever you go, there'll be loads of them, and people chuck them around casually and just assume you know what they are. And they're not even necessarily the same. So ASD, you normally think of as autistic spectrum disorder, but AS in the council is adult services. So if you don't check, you can be quite cross purposes with a conversation.